Hey guys, welcome to the FitTown Show. This is Coach Andrew with Coach Nick today. And today we're going to be talking about athleticism versus fitness. And we're going to give you guys kind of a definition of both. We'll talk about the differences here. And mainly the reason we're defining this is because we have a lot of our members that want to play sports and do things and use their fitness, on the weekends and do these different types of sports. And we want them to be able to do healthy. A lot of people get hurt when they go and do these things. And we want to talk about the difference between the training of what we do in the gym and the nuances you might need to know or think about or add to your routine in order to be ready for these sports outside the gym. And we also work with a lot of teens, high school, college athletes as well. And a lot of those athletes do one-on-one training to get ready for their sport. They don't usually do our group classes, or they are doing a combination of both group classes and personal training. And why we approach it that way, why that athleticism side is a little bit different than just the general fitness side. So Nick, I was hoping you can kick it off with just kind of maybe defining those a little bit so we can get a better idea of what those differences are.
Sure. So, Greg Glassman, founder of CrossFit, groundbreaking definition of fitness, right? Work capacity across broad time and modal domains. And the objective for what we're trying to do in the gym is to increase our work capacity across different time domains and different modalities of what you might see in and out of the gym. So hasn't been a really good definition of athleticism for a while now, until a few years ago when Power Athlete defined it as, I'm going to get real specific here, the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space and time to perform known and novel tasks. So a couple things jump out for me in that definition is known and novel tasks, and then the primal movement patterns. So known task would be, all right, we're going to squat today, or we're going to run a 5-10-5 or a 3-cone drill. Those are things you might see on a pretty regular basis in a training program, say for like a defensive back in football. A novel task would be now going out and doing your job and performing. And bullets are flying and things are moving and everybody's moving at full speed and things are changing at a millisecond pace. So that would now be, a novel task. And for our athletes in the gym, a novel task for them might be ultimate frisbee on the weekends, or spike ball, or any of those things.
Speaking my language, man.
Yeah. So that may not necessarily be something that they're training for. Whereas a known task for them would be, okay, I'm going to open up Sugar Wad. This is what we're doing today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to go back to that Greg Glassman definition because I think if anything CrossFit did really well to bring to the table, it was that definition, the fitness definition. And I always think about it because I think the broad time and modal domains can be a little bit like, what does that really mean for a lot of people? I always have really enjoyed the 10 components of fitness, of like strength, speed, stamina. It's the ones that we have on our wall.
For sure.
And kind of thinking, okay, a well-rounded fit athlete is good in all of these. But from what I've seen, now that I think about it more, it seems like when you're talking fitness, it is skewed more towards the strength, the speed, the stamina, the endurance, stuff like that, whereas the athleticism is more skewed towards like the coordination, the balance, the agility, more of those neurological ones of the fitness. Is that kind of how you're seeing it too?
I would agree with that as well. I think, that's a really, really good starting point, that those 10 traits of fitness. And I think through our inherent biases and through what we like to do in the gym and what we like to have fun with, some of those other things that might not be nearly as like sexy or fun probably get glossed over a little bit for the sake of, everybody having a good time. Which is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but now when we're starting to get into like the nitty-gritty and a very specific situation, that's when those holes might start to pop up.
Yeah, so the athlete they have a better idea of what they're training for but there's more unknowns in that sport of in any given play or any given moment, your body has to be capable of, a million different things at once.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So if my idea or if my perception of how in really, really good shape I am in is my FitTown triathlon time or my Fran time, when I go out on the field, I'm going to have a very, very rude awakening, because none of that stuff is really going to matter when I'm going through all of my different planes of motion and I'm moving through full speed and I'm working with somebody else against me and not necessarily a clock.
Yeah, it's a great base to pull off of, but there's a big layer above that.
Absolutely.
Of that sport specific stuff.
Yeah, I think for what we do, it covers so much. We are very broad and not necessarily inclusive as far as our training, and I think that's appropriate for most people. But when they want to take it to another level and they want to perform really well, or say not get hurt, on the weekends, if they're weekend warriors, then we have to start doing things a little bit different.
Cool. So what are the first places? I know you work with a lot of athletes, high school, college athletes. Mm-hmm. You work with some people one-on-one that are just everyday members that want to be able to go out and play their sport and not get hurt and do it fun and casually. What are some of the things that you're thinking about or approaching differently than when you coach that same person in a group class?
So I like to talk about like the low-hanging fruit all the time. Like, what are these limiting factors? What are things I can nip in the bud, like really, really, really quickly, that are probably going to have a really, really positive and massive effect on what they might do outside of the gym. And that's, how does that person land when they jump? How does that person initiate their jump? What do they look like when they squat? Are they more of a quad dominant, toes out type of athlete? Just those little nuanced things like that can make a really, really big difference, when we're not in the gym, because something that gets you a really, really big back squat may not necessarily put you in the best position to succeed out of the field.
Yeah, the idea of quad dominant really jumps out to me. How can someone sort of build those opposing muscle groups better in more of a one-on-one setting or as an accessory to the class? Yeah,
so for me, it's always been so interesting, because I think we make such a big point about whether athletes are quad dominant or they're turning the hamstrings on or they're firing their glutes or whatever. And for me, it's just like just a different mindset. I think people thinking about it. So maybe they squat just a couple inches wider, and maybe that's it. Maybe they raise their hips a little bit taller when they're going to set up for a deadlift. Maybe they land a little bit differently on top of a box when they do a box jump. And just to start getting to think about those things a little bit differently can make, I think, a really, really big difference as far as how those movement patterns are going to get expressed, like when they're not in the gym. I think the quad dominant thing arises from lifestyle more than anything else. Is that we have desks, we have jobs, we have school that we have to go to, we have Zoom meetings that now we got to sit through for hours on end. And through those lifestyle patterns, we start to, I think, inherently become that quad dominant, duck-footed, toes out, more athlete. So you start to see those things pop up when people are running, and they start to get shin splints and plantar fasciitis and things like that, because their feet are moving different directions when they run. And when they go to squat, their toes are out. And one of the biggest things that I've encountered with coaching athletes is something like a lunge, because I'm so used to, throughout my day, my toe going this way when I move, that's what happens when I go to set up for a lunge. The great thing about the lunge is that it'll expose you so fast. I will fall apart. My hip is going this way, my toe is going this way. So we have that athlete move that toe in now, where they get a little bit more internally rotated versus that external rotation of the hip. And now they find, oh, I can lunge straight up and straight down, and you know, I have eliminated any sort of knee pain or imbalances just by simply moving the feet in.
Yeah, so a lot of these concepts could actually make this person better at just the fitness component, because it's really just appropriate technique, right?
Yeah,
it's little
absolutely.
nuances of starting your box jump or a broad jump by sending your butt back and using your hamstrings and glutes well. On a step up or a lunge, making sure that knee is stacked over the ankle really well and not driving it out like you would on a squat, because it's two different types of things you're trying to accomplish. What are your thoughts on the importance of the single leg stuff? Because that's really, for me, one of the biggest things that I think about when I think about sport is so much of sport happens on one leg, right? You're usually doing some version of running. You know, a lot of times you're going laterally and you're going these different directions, and you're almost never really truly on 2 feet the same way you would be in a squat or box jump or a deadlift.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. So, my athletes, you know, day one, I'm locking them inside a room until we've mastered the lunge and mastered the dead bug. And we can get into the dead bug later on. But yeah, like that is so important to be able to have that spatial awareness of how a lunge is supposed to look, how a step up is supposed to look, because essentially what you're doing is, if you take a snapshot of that athlete while they're in the middle of a lunge or while they're in the middle of a step up, it should resemble their sprint to some sort of degree. And if it doesn't, you know, we can't realistically expect that that sprint technique is going to translate over to the field if I'm doing all this single leg technique work and those movements aren't talking to each other. So the lunge is going to be super, super important, and it might look a little bit different than a lunge in class would look. You know, it might be a little bit of a wider stance, more of a duck-footed, where that toe is coming in, or more pigeon-toed, excuse me, where that toe is coming in, and that back foot is especially just super, super aggressive. Because that's really how a sprint should be looking. If I cut that person in half and I freeze frame that sprint. And then the step up is the same thing. Step up's a really, really interesting movement because it's very, very difficult to do well. And that's one of the things that I just really have my athletes slow down on, because I think that's a movement that can get away from athletes very, very quickly, is when it more looks like a step on rather than a step up. You know, if all I'm doing is just kind of just stepping onto this box because that's what's being asked of me to do, rather than stepping up the box now where I'm loading that hamstring and, you know, everything is kind of moving how it's supposed to move, which is what I want. But, you know, context is super, super important in that case.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've noticed with the way you work with your athletes and the way a lot of our coaches work with their athletes is there's a certain level of intentionality to everything, and that it's not just about like the movement itself. I mean, you took us through like a Spider-Man lunge complex the other day of kind of how you do it in a one-on-one setting. It's a completely different feel because you're paying attention to which way the hips are facing, which way the knees are facing, and that level of an intentionality brings a completely different feel to those movements. So in something like a step up, like we've all done step ups, but if you can do it, you know, focus on really driving through that heel, being intentional, driving and extending the leg, being explosive, it's a completely different movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do athletes prepare themselves to get ready to do sports outside the gym? Because like I'm thinking for myself, I mean, I just hurt myself the other day playing soccer. And for me, I think if I were to simplify it, it's like, okay, I don't really sprint at full speed. You know, we do a lot of running in here. We do some harder runs, but it's not the way I open it up on a field. Yeah. You know, so even many times when I've hurt myself, it's a completely straight run where I've just opened it up to full speed, and then my hamstring's like, oh, that's a little bit too much. I know for other people, it's, you know, playing basketball, playing frisbee, coming down, landing, the knee goes kind of a different direction. So like, I don't know, are there exercises, stretches, things that someone can do to supplement what they're doing in classes that you think are like the low-hanging fruit for that?
For sure. And I would to answer all of that, just do something different, right? So the knees out cue is really, really good, and it's been used forever. If you don't know what we're talking about, it's, you know, if an athlete's coming up from a squat, knees start to cave in a little bit, hey, knees out, man, drive those knees out. All right, cool. Now they're in a better position than they were. Unfortunately, I find that the knees out cue has been overcooked so much to where now it's knees out on everything. So if I'm trying to drive my knees out in a lunge, or let's say like a Bulgarian split squat, right, where that front foot is planted, my back foot is elevated onto a bench or a box, and I'm so used to driving that knee out, well, that's what's going to happen on the field too. So when I go to cut, change direction, sprint, whatever the case is, because I'm so used to that central nervous system being mapped, the ankle is going to go this way and my knee is going to go this way. So that's not great, right? Really, truly, at the end of the day, we want everything to be moving in line as one. So, you know, when I go to cut this way and go back this way, or land from, you know, a rebound, or anything like that, or even try to absorb like a hit or something like that, and I'm in this position, my knees are going out, my foot is planted, that's a recipe for a knee injury right there. So I would look at very, very, very little things that I do in the gym. So maybe when I'm setting up for a good morning, you know, instead of when my hips go back and that barbell is on top of my back, check out where your knees are, right? Are my knees going this way and my toes are facing this way, or is everything in line, right? If I'm doing a Spider-Man lunge, where's that knee in relationship to my toe? A gorilla squat. I think a lot of very little things have those big effects on athletes when they're doing an inchworm, right? And they're walking those hands forward to go set up for that push-up. Are they driving their knees out, or is everything in line? You know, so I think little habitual things like that don't necessarily have to be very sexy to make a big effect, but I think if you just start messing around with how you step, like take a look at your feet when you're walking up the stairs, right? Which way are they going? That's going to be very, very telling of what they're going to do in the middle of a 100% all-out effort sprint. Now, to answer your question earlier about the sprint, you got to sprint.
Exactly.
You got to sprint. You know, nothing replaces that.
If I would say hamstring injury is probably the most common.
Yeah. Totally.
Kind of the weekend warrior.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you add to the effect that I'm training in a quad dominant manner Monday through Saturday or Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, and now I'm asking my hamstrings to do a job that they're not necessarily prepared to do, or my ankles aren't necessarily prepared to do. You know, that's how we get tweaks and things like that. If I had to pick 3 movements to do forever: back squat, strict pull-up, and sprints. And I think that would cover just about everything that you would want from an athlete. You know, you're getting your athleticism in a sprint, you're getting upper body development, coordination with a strict pull-up, and then everything else in the back squat. Yeah, nothing really replaces the sprint. I'd love to see some sprint days where we go out there and just race each other. I think that'd be super fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then that's when, well, what would a personal training session look like versus a class setting look like? Because that may not be necessarily appropriate to program in a class setting. Like, there's probably people who don't need to be sprinting. But if you're a client of mine, yeah, you better be sprinting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I noticed you do a lot of change of direction drills. You do a lot of sled stuff, a lot of like band work as well. And I mean, I noticed like rotational stuff as well, depending on the client, you know, and that's where I think people can start to map this out to their sport. It doesn't, you don't have to have our knowledge base. I mean, if you want to use us and get programming or personal training sessions, you can do that. But like, if you're going to go play pickleball, let's say as an example, you can understand there's some rotational element to that. There's a lot of lateral stuff to that.
For sure.
You can add in some lateral shuttle sprints. You know, you can add in some rotational twists or rotational stretching to make sure you have the appropriate range of motion. So I think people can kind of do their own mapping to a certain degree. Obviously, if you want to take it to the next level, we can help.
Absolutely.
Is that how you're kind of thinking about it?
For sure. And, you know, in the power athlete community, a few years back, it was a pretty controversial movement that they started, but it got people talking, which is the goal. And it was the idea of that we're going to do everything with our toes forward, right? And this was really controversial at the time, especially with folks who wanted to hold on to their really big squat numbers. And they were finding that when they were setting up in a more athletic stance with their hips a little bit more internally rotated and their knee over the instep of the foot and their toes were forward, one, they weren't getting as deep in their squat because, yeah, your range of motion is going to be a little bit more limited, but we're focusing on the hamstring and sending the knees back and the hips back. And then one, like their numbers were dropping significantly. Like, oh man, I'm not squatting as much. This is BS, right? This is stupid, right? But the conversation began to happen of, well, what are you training for? You know, are you training to have a really big back squat, or are you training to be on the field and win and run really fast and do all these things and stay healthy? You know, so I think athletes need to understand that it's up to them at the end of the day. Context is important. You know, how much do I really want to be out on the field and playing these sports on the weekends, or are the numbers that I put up in the gym much more important? You know? And for me, like, the answer is always going to be whatever it is I do outside of the gym is going to be far more important. Yeah.
Yeah, you can balance both, but realize if you're trying to get everything you can out of the in-gym aspect, you're going to give up something in the out-of-gym
For
aspect.
sure. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a give and take, you know? And, you know, with my background, the way, kind of how I move, my moving patterns, and the way I lift, like, I was never going to squat as much as the guy next to me who was more of an Olympic weightlifter type of stance, with a more narrow stance, with a much taller chest and his elbows up much taller than me. You know, I knew that, like, those numbers that guy was going to hit, I was just never going to come close to. But I was okay with that because I knew that at the end of the day, when we go on the field, I'm going to smoke him every single time.
Yeah. So let's talk about the dead bug. You know, power athlete, that's a big aspect of what they do. And it's kind of like, you know, you think about power athlete actually was a program called CrossFit Football. That those of you guys that are not familiar with this transition. So you hear that and you think, okay, this is like back squat, deadlift, bench press. This is sprinting, sleds, heavy weights. Okay, and then the dead bug is a foundational piece of what they teach at their seminars. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's pretty cool because, wow, like the dead bug is like the least dramatic thing in the world, and like all the things you just described are so cool, you know, and they're big and fun and powerful and violent, but at the end of the day, everything starts with the dead bug. So the way it was taught to me and the way that I kind of approach this movement is it's an assessment tool and it is a movement transfer tool. So I can very much bring an athlete on day one, give them the expectations, and this is, hey, what we're going to do. Now let's try to execute this movement on the floor. If the athlete can't do that, I cannot reasonably expect for them to be able to do that with a barbell on top of their back. You know, so at the end of the day, when we're talking about a dead bug, an athlete's lying on their back is completely painted to the floor, so there is no sort of gap in that lumbar curve, right? We've eliminated that by pulling our rib cage down and creating a neutral spine, right? First and foremost, that's got to be very, very important. The legs are fully extended straight up. Their hips are right here, so 90 degrees. Their ankles are in dorsiflexion, right? That's going to be another big one. So if, I'll take my shoe off here. So if an athlete is in plantar flexion, right? Toe is pointing down. right? You'd see that more like with our gymnastics folks. Their toe is going to be pointed down a lot, our dancers and things like that. I need for my athletes to be a little bit more powerful and violent, and that's where that dorsiflex ankle is going to come into play. So if they're lying on their back, their ankle is now going to look more like this rather than this. But if I lie them down on the floor, and this is the first thing that they do, and they just keep defaulting back to this, I can reasonably expect that that's what they're going to do in their sprint too. Or when I go change direction, that they're going to put this guy into the floor first rather than this guy right here.
And that's essentially a quad dominant athlete. He's going to be kind of toes forward. They're not driving through their heel, their butt,
yeah,
posterior.
Exactly. It's all kinetic. It's all upstream and downstream. So their ankle is now pointing up here if possible, right? So that's going to be a point of performance that I'm going to be looking for. Another thing that I'm going to be looking for, so if you can imagine that, right, this heel is pointed towards you, you are standing in front of that athlete, right, their butt's kind of facing you, and one of the things that they're going to default to is something like this, where their toes are going to be pointed out, right? I can expect that they have a lot of external rotation in their hips. They're going to do that when they go to change direction too. So we're going to move them through all sorts of things through space. Okay, so we've locked that down. We got dorsiflex ankles, right? Our quads are locked out. My shoulders are in external rotation. They're out in front of me. We got that spine neutral. All right, cool. Great. You can do that while you're lying on the floor. Now, let's move a little bit, right? So we're saying, hey, Andrew, send that right leg forward, right? So that right leg's going to go forward, right? And this is the first thing that they do is that ankle goes into plantar flexion. Their toe starts to point out like this. I can expect that that's what they're going to do out in the field as well, right? They're going to default back to those positions. So there's my assessment. So now I can start fixing them, right? They're out here, they're externally rotated, they're wound up, knees out, knees out, knees out, knees out. That's what they're falling back to at all times. So we're going to get them move in the opposite direction. We're going to internally rotate those hips a little bit more. We're going to get them understanding as they send that leg forward that they need to maintain that. That spine still needs to be locked down to the ground as that foot goes forward or as that arm goes backward. That chin needs to remain tucked. Now, how is that a movement transfer tool as well? All right, so I'm here. I put a barbell in front of their hands. They're in a good position to do a bench press, right? Mm-hmm. If I was to bend those knees, I put their arms back like this. I put a barbell on their back. They're in a great position to do a back squat. Deadlift, same thing. They're all points of performances that I want to see when an athlete is moving through space and when they have a barbell in their hands. I want dorsiflex ankles. I want a neutral spine. I want externally rotated shoulders. I want the hips to be slightly internally rotated if they're way out here. I want that chin tucked, right? So that spine is now neutral if I'm picking up something off the floor. Or if I go to do a pull-up, I don't want that chin to be reached. I still want that chin to be tucked down here. So movement transfer tool, movement assessment tool, and I'm going to hammer them over and over and over and over again in all sorts of different ways. So let's put a kettlebell in their hands. Let's see if they can go overhead and still maintain, you know, that neutral spine on the floor. And if they can do all of that stuff, I'm pretty happy with what they're going to be able to do on the field or what they're going to be able to do with a barbell on their back.
Yeah, the neutral spine is like such a big aspect to all this. Yeah, I mean, I think people don't really understand sort of the forces that life or sport is throwing on them and how important it is to be able to control that spine through space when that stuff happens. I mean, so many of the back injuries we see, whether it's in sport, whether it's in the gym, whether it's just a lot of times it's just the random task you do outside the gym. You know, grabbing something out of your car, you're doing some yard work, and something goes, and sometimes those are major injuries, and that's really what you're talking about with this dead bug is like the ability to keep your spine solid regardless of what your extremities are doing around you.
Yeah. I think people really truly need to understand that what they're doing in the gym is creating a default posture and position for whatever task that they're now going to be handed to them. You know, whether it's helping their friend move a couch, or picking up your baby, or the million different things that you could be doing outside of the gym, that's where you're going to fall back to, is whatever it is you're doing in here. And, you know, you go to throw that weight belt on when you go to do a deadlift, you're not going to throw that weight belt on when you're at the grocery store and you got to pick up a 24-pack of water. You know, so the understanding of how to understand and create stability, which is control of that spine and that range of motion, is truthfully, I mean, going to be the most powerful thing that you ever take away from the gym. It's not going to be your clean, it's not going to be your snatch, not going to be your pull-ups, it's not going to be your toes to bar. It's going to be, do I have an understanding of how to control this range of motion while I'm under stress?
Nice.
Which is what sport is and life is.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. I think we'll pretty much wrap up there. Is there anything else that you want to talk about as it relates to this?
No, not really. Just, you know, do something different. Try something different at the end of the day. Check yourself out. Like, if that's something that's important to you,
yeah,
moving really, really well outside the gym and being able to handle the demands of sport, you know, there's nothing general about sport. It's all very, very specific. So I need my foot to be in this place. I need my ankle to be in this place. I need my big toe to be locked down. So if that's important to you, do those things in the gym as well. And if you don't know how to do that or where to start, come see me, come see Drew, come see our coaches, and we'll take care of you.
Cool. And if you want to play sports with us, hit me up.
Yes. Sundays,
Andrew
right?
at FitTown.com. We love playing Frisbee, spike ball, soccer on Sundays. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for joining, guys.
Later.